Ever get that feeling, like you're putting in the hours, but you're always playing catch up?
Yeah, I think we all have those days.
Well, it turns out that's the reality for a lot of church leaders.
Really?
Yeah. Today's deep dive, we're diving into some research on what it's really like to be a pastor these days beyond, the Sunday best. And get this, almost 40% of them have considered quitting in recent years.
Wow, 40%. That's huge.
It is. We're talking serious demands on their time, their family life, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's a side of ministry we don't often see. People picture like inspiring sermons and community events,
Right, right.
but the data paints this whole other picture.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking demanding schedules, a constant need to be on.
Exactly.
Like we're talking 50 to 65 hours of work per week on average.
Seriously.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, that's a whole extra day of work most weeks. And sermon prep alone,
Oh gosh, yeah.
10 to 18 hours. That's like a part-time job on top of everything else.
And it's not even just like the sheer volume, right? It's the nature of the work.
Yeah.
Pastoral care, counseling, administrative tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't things you can just clock out of at 5 p.m.
No, definitely not.
They follow you home even on vacation. 78% of pastors have had their vacations interrupted.
Whoa, hold on. Vacations interrupted.
Yeah,
I guess work-life balance isn't really in their vocabulary, huh?
sadly no.
You'd think with a job centered around rest and reflection, they'd at least get a decent vacation.
You'd think so, but the reality is this constant need to be available, it takes a toll, a big one.
Yeah, I bet.
We see it in the data on pastor loneliness.
Mhm.
65% report feeling isolated.
65%. That's more than just a case of the Mondays. That's a 5-alarm fire.
Exactly. It's a recipe for burnout, especially with the pressure of balancing ministry and family. And that's where things get even more complicated. We were talking about how demanding ministry is, but then there's the impact on pastors' families.
Right, right. Their families make sacrifices too.
Huge sacrifices. 75% of pastors rated as having high relational risk say their ministry negatively impacts their families.
75%.
Wow.
That's rough.
It is. And it's not just, oh, sorry, we have to reschedule dinner again.
Right. It's got to be deeper than that.
It's the emotional baggage. Spouses deal with the pressure too. And then there's the resentment toward the congregation, toward ministry itself.
Wow. It really is like that saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Exactly. And that ripple effect, it's huge. It's pastors trying to be there for everyone while also feeling that strain at home.
It's a tightrope walk for sure.
And that's why so many struggle to find that balance.
Yeah. It makes me think of other demanding jobs like doctors or first responders. They have long hours, intense situations.
Right.
But there's something unique about the pressure on pastors, that pressure to always be on.
You hit the nail on the head. There's this expectation of moral authority, spiritual guidance. It makes it difficult to set boundaries.
Yeah, like they're always on call.
2/7.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Wow. So where do we go from here? Is this just the reality of ministry? Or is there any hope for the future?
Well, the data does offer a glimmer of hope, actually. Despite the challenges, 51% of pastors today feel more confident in their calling than when they started.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's up from 35% in 2022. So it's trending in the right direction.
Okay, so maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel. But you did mention that a lot of pastors are relatively new to ministry.
Right.
Over half have been in their roles less than 10 years.
Yeah, and that could be significant. It could be a generational shift.
How so?
Maybe younger leaders are coming in with different expectations. They're prioritizing their well-being, setting boundaries.
It makes you wonder if those older pastors, ones who've been doing it for decades, can they do that? Can they set those boundaries?
That's the million-dollar question. And it highlights one of the biggest disconnects we found in the data. 57% of the public trusts pastors as sources of wisdom and guidance.
Yeah, that tracks.
But only 21% of pastors feel that trust from their congregations.
Wow. That's a huge gap. What do you make of that?
It's complicated, but I think it might be the pressure to be perfect.
Oh, interesting.
Pastors might feel like they can't be vulnerable, admit they need a break. They don't want to appear weak.
That's a lot of pressure. It's like they're expected to be superhuman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Juggling these huge roles, battling their own human limitations.
And that's why this data is so important.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that pastors, they're human too.
Behind the title, behind the pulpit, they're real people.
With real struggles.
With real families.
And they need our support just like anyone else.
100%.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget that,
Hmm.
We get caught up in our own lives, and
Absolutely.
we forget that the people leading us, guiding us, they're human. They're
Yeah.
dealing with a lot more than we realize.
That's the thing, right? We put pastors up on this pedestal. They're supposed to be these pillars of strength, always have the answers. But this data, it's a good reminder. Pastors have limitations. They feel pressure. They need support, just like all of us.
Absolutely. So what does this mean for the rest of us, the people in the pews?
Yeah.
What can we do with this information?
Well, I think step one is just remembering that our faith leaders,
Hmm.
they're human.
Right.
They've got families. They have struggles. They have bad days, just like us.
Oh, for sure.
And remembering that can make a big difference. It can help us have healthier, more supportive relationships with them.
So more grace, less judgment. I
Exactly.
like that.
It's about having that same compassion we'd offer to anyone else going through a difficult time.
Right.
Maybe it's being more understanding when they need a break,
Mhm.
or just checking in on them, really checking in. Not just the Sunday pleasantries.
Yeah, it's easy to forget. They might be carrying the weight of like a dozen different conversations, worries,
Absolutely.
and they still have to get up there and deliver a message of hope.
It's a lot.
Hmm.
And honestly, a small gesture of support can make all the difference.
Like what?
Just a simple, how are you really doing? Or offering to help with something. Those little things can go a long way. It shows them they're seen, they're valued.
It's about building a community of mutual support.
Right.
We're all in this together, right? Leaders, congregation.
That's it.
Because ultimately, a healthy church, everyone feels supported. Everyone feels cared for.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to our listeners, here's something to think about. How can you be a source of support for your faith leaders? It could be a small gesture, just a listening ear. Or maybe you see a need and you step up to help. Whatever it looks like, let's create spaces where our leaders feel valued, not just for their roles, but for the human beings they are.
That's a great note to end on.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today, everyone.
My pleasure.